I think there are 3 examples of ways to have faith today in the lessons. In the first lesson, we have the prayer of King Solomon at the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem. The temple has been completed finally, and Solomon comes and prays this prayer, dedicating the whole thing. He says, Lord, here's our vision for the future. Even when a foreigner comes and prays here, we want you to hear that foreigner's prayers, and we want that foreigner to see your glory in the world. And it reminded me a little bit of the pictures I've seen. Have you seen the pictures downstairs in the archives of when this building was dedicated in 1911? There is a picture of all of the church elders and the pastor and a whole bunch of other pastors standing on the steps out there, and they're holding the silver communion ware, getting ready to bring it into the sanctuary. And I think the prayers uttered on that day in 1911 were probably similar to Solomon's prayer of faith. It's a prayer of, wow, look what God has helped us accomplish. Hey, look what God has accomplished here. And we see a bright vision for the future. That's one way to have faith, isn't it? When things are all rosy and things are going well, and you can look and say, oh, God has blessed us. Look, isn't this great? It's one way I have faith, no doubt about it. Then there's Paul's way of having faith in the second lesson. He starts out that letter, that's this very first part of the letter to the Galatians, and you notice how quickly Paul gets angry in the letter? Did you notice that? In most of his letters, he'll have this whole big paragraph about how he thanks God for this congregation and the wonderful things they're doing and how they inspire him. In this one, he goes directly from, hello, how are you, I'm Paul, to, I can't believe you are abandoning the gospel of Jesus Christ so quickly. And then he goes on to, really, it's his angriest letter. Of all the letters in the Bible, it's his angriest. And what's happened is, after he founded this church in Corinth, or in Galatia, some people came in after him and said, well, Paul didn't have it right. You see, it's not about just faith in Jesus. You also have to become a Jew. You have to be converted. You have to be circumcised, and men will have to be circumcised. And you have to obey the law of Moses. That's why Paul is so irate. Because his whole thing is no. You don't have to first obey Moses before you come to Jesus. So that's another way to have faith, is to be standing up for the faith, to know the content of the faith. To know, this is what I believe about God. This is what I believe saves me. Grace alone. Faith alone. Finally, there is the faith we run into in the gospel lesson today, where this centurion, a Roman, a foreigner, sends word to Jesus by some elders, could you heal my slave for me, please? And then his slave is dying. Apparently a slave is very dear to him, that is very dear to him. His slave is dying. And even at that, in the midst of that crisis, this man has enough faith, what we call faith, to say, Jesus, I'm not worthy to have you come here. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. Faith in the time of crisis. Faith in the time when things are not going well. And I don't know about you, or maybe I do know about you, but that's the hardest for me to have faith, is in the time of crisis, when things are not going well. And Jesus marvels at this man. In all Israel, I have not seen such faith. So what does it mean to have faith? Well, here are a few Bible passages about faith. For everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. We live by faith, not by sight. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God. Faith is, I suppose, defined by feeling confident about God. But faith is also informed by our experience in life. Like what's going on with Paul and the crisis he's having with the church that he founded, or what's going on with the centurion and the crisis he's having around the sickness of his slave. Faith is also informed by learning. That's why we gather together in church, to learn a few things about God, about faith in Jesus. Faith is formed in the community. Have you ever been at church or with a group of believers, and one of the people is in a terrible crisis, and yet they're demonstrating this incredible trust in God, and you sit there and marvel at their faith? That's part of why we gather together, because we need each other to look to for example and for inspiration. Faith is tested by life, and faith is confirmed by God. In his book, Telling Secrets, the author Frederick Buechner writes about a time when his faith was severely tested. His daughter has anorexia, and it was to the point where she wasn't getting better, she was getting worse, and she was close to the point where she was going to starve herself to death. And he talks about how I think he was in his car and he pulled over because he was in such distress. He was just paralyzed by his anxiety over his daughter and what was going on with her. And he said in that moment, as he was, crying out to God, calling out to God, he said there was a license plate, a vanity license plate in front of him that was the word trust. And he said in that moment, something happened when he saw that word trust in front of him, where he was able to turn the situation over to God. Or he was able, where his faith was restored to the point that he knew, okay, I will be okay. Things will be okay. Not maybe the way he wants them, but okay. And I can remember a time in my life when I was in severe crisis too. And when we're in the crisis like that, don't we look for signs? I was in the same kind of worry and anxiety. I was visiting my sister in Kalamazoo, and it was in the evening, shortly after I arrived, and they had a thunderstorm go through, but the sun came out in the west then again, and there was this glorious full double rainbow. And I remember, because I was struggling all the way to Kalamazoo, I remember struggling, but thinking, for some reason, seeing that sign in the heavens, thinking it will be okay. Thinking this is somehow an assurance. But signs don't last forever. They help in a moment and give hope in a moment, but they don't give faith. What I think gives faith is our living together, and our loving together, and our struggling together, and our helping each other together when we need help. Another passage in the Bible, St. Paul himself says, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but don't have love, I am nothing. If I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." And I think that's the connection. What was the centurion's motivation from the very beginning? Why did the Jewish elders want to come and talk to Jesus for the sake of that centurion? He loved his slave, but that isn't why they came. That's not why they said to Jesus, he is worthy it is worthy that you should do this for him. For he did what?
Built the church.
He built our synagogue for us. This man showed great love. He's part of the Roman oppressor army, and yet in this village, Capernaum, he built the synagogue, probably provided the money and the manpower. So he showed great love for the village where he's the guy who's actually in charge of making sure that people don't get out of line. And his whole motivation for coming to Jesus over his slave? Love. So I think faith and love come together. And faith is fed and informed and grows as we learn to love the most of all. And faith doesn't mean being always sure. Take a look at the guy in the Garden of Gethsemane to know that. But finally, why was he doing that? It was an act of love. Finally, why did he get to that? It was an act of love. Where did his faith in his Father lead him finally? To resurrection. So I think that's what faith is for us. It's all the things that we heard in the lessons today, but finally, it is the finding of love in a community and the sharing of love that we can do.